Good morning, everybody. This is Brad Bertelli with the Keys History and Discovery Center. We're here as part of our Field Trip Fridays as we're exploring different historic locations around the Upper Keys. And today we are at the Reef House. Reef is the Reef Environmental Education Foundation, and it is home to this yellow structure behind me, which was built in 1912 and is really cool because it is the oldest oldest building in Key Largo that is still in its original location. But before we get to more about the house, let's talk a little bit about the family who built the house. In 1886, William and Mary Albury moved from Key West up to Key Largo with their 3-year-old son, Beauregard. And they moved up to this Key Largo area, which is actually Rock Harbor, and they were farmers. They were farming pineapples until the pineapple blight, 1906, 1910, when there were a series of hurricanes that kind of salted, with the storm surge coming across and kind of salting the earth, kind of ruined the land for pineapples. So the Alburys began planting key lime trees. So their property we are standing in the median of the overseas highway. Historically, the southbound lane would have been the direction of the railroad tracks. They would have been traveling south, and then the old highway, State Road 4A, is traveling on the other side of the highway of the house going north. Now, the Albury property was in this area. Again, they were farming pineapples. Then they began farming key lime trees. When they built this house in, Beauregard was married in 1910 to Mamie Albury, and so Beauregard and Mamie, they built this house, started construction about 1910. It's all Dade County pine, which all of the old houses were. Dade County pine was awesome because it was very hard timber and it didn't react well to termites and other bugs. It kind of kept them out because the wood is so hard. Again, if you have questions, feel free to type in, and Erin will get back to me if she can avoid the fire ants that I think are creeping up on her. Do we need to move a little bit? Okay. She's dancing a little bit in the background. So this house was built, started in 1910, completed about 1912. It was considered very modern in its time because, unlike most of the houses built before the turn of the century and after, were located on the beach or on the Atlantic facing side because you wanted to take advantage of those Atlantic breezes coming in to act as a means of air conditioning and a means of pest control. What was kind of interesting about this house, which is really kind of Bahamian structure, was it was one of the first houses to use screens in the windows to help keep some of those mosquitoes out. And being kind of in the middle of the island, this would have been dense mosquito country. Yes, Miss Muir.
We have 2 questions. The first is from Ryan. He'd like to know if the Alburys had to bring key limes into the area to farm them, or if they were already naturally occurring in the
Key limes date back at least to the 1820s. They were being grown up in around the Miami River and the New River, which is the Fort Lauderdale area. I've seen one instance of them being recorded as early as, I think, 1817, 1819, I believe. So key limes were already in the area, and in those days they weren't key limes; they were just called limes. And what was the second question?
The second question is from Jim. Jim would like to know, is the original Highway 4A still in existence?
Portions of State Road 4A are still in existence. If you come down the Card Sound route, not the 18-mile stretch, that Card Sound route over the Card Sound Bridge past Alabama Jacks, that is the original State Road 4A, and that was the original before 1944. That was the only way that an automobile could drive through the Keys. There are still portions of State Road 4A in the Upper Keys. It's often referred to as the Old Highway. There's long stretches of it on Plantation Key, long stretches of it on Upper Matacumby Key. In the Lower Keys, around Sugarloaf and Big Pine, there are areas where the State Road 4A is still accessible, and you can still kind of drive on it. So that answers your question. Excellent. Now, some cool things about the Albury family. During construction of the railroad, the Alburys, Beauregard and his father, used to fish. And they would supply the railroad line with food for their workers, and they would fish using a hand line, collecting about between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds of fish per day, of which they were paid 5 cents a pound. Now, if you're being paid 5 cents a pound and you bring in 1,500 pounds of fish, you're making about $75 a day. By comparison, the railroad workers were making about $1.25 a day. So you can see that the fishing was really, especially when they did it for several years during construction. And they would catch the fish, they would put it in burlap sacks, the railroad company would supply the ice, and then they would ship it to the different railroad camps along up and down the Keys during the construction. They would also fish for crawfish, for Florida lobster. Now, in those days, Beauregard tells stories of finding, and this is using a hand net basically at the edge of the island, and the crawfish would be stacked 2 or 3 feet high along the mangroves. And they would find them off of Rodriguez Key, on the lee side of Rodriguez Key, on the lee side of Tavernier Key, and the lee side of Key Largo. And during, I don't know what a successful a crawfish season yields today, but during their last season of collecting crawfish, the Alburys recorded, and this is, as they say, after the species had already been depleted quite a bit, they were bringing in 54,000 pounds of lobster a season, which is pretty tremendous. I'm not sure what the fishermen bring in today, but again, great money for, in those days. So they were farming pineapples, and that went away. They were farming key limes, and then they were also fishing to help provide food sources and proteins for the railroad workers. Now, one of the interesting things about this property is they had a pretty large property. About 1923, the decision was made to build a more permanent school for the children in the Rock Harbor area. And the Alburys donated some of their land for a 2-room Coral Rock building to act as a grammar school for the Rock Harbor area. And this was actually one of 2 schools that were built that opened about 1926 for the community. There was the school here in Rock Harbor, which is now home to the Key Largo Moose Lodge, and it's not so visible from the northbound lane on Overseas Highway, but on the southbound lane, you can still see portions of the Coral Rock structures of the original Rock Harbor Grammar School. Now, the sister school to the Rock Harbor School was built in Matacumby, the Matacumby Grammar School, which was built on the property that is known today as the Chica Lodge. And that that school was destroyed in the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. The school up here remained intact and continued service. One of the other cool features, we're going to walk this way a little bit, of this house is back in those days, most of the homes in the area had a cistern and utilized cisterns to collect rainwater because fresh water was still a problem. The freshwater pipeline didn't really come down the Florida Keys until 1943, 1944. So houses would have cisterns to collect rainwater, and the gutter systems on top of the house would be as such that the houses were always built with a steeped roof. What? Peaked roof, thank you very much. And then which would allow the rainwater to fall off, pool in the gutters, and then empty out into one of the 2 cisterns. They have a square cistern here as well as a round cistern. Now, the round cistern still looks relatively intact, and that is not by accident, but in 2014, Jerry Wilkinson, president of the Historical Preservation Society of the Upper Keys, their group Hi, welcome back. I'm Brad Bertelli. I'm the curator for the Keys History and Discovery Center, and we're at the Beauregard Albury House on Key Largo, about mile marker 98. Today it's home to the Reef Education Environmental Foundation. The Reef Environmental Education Foundation, which is headquartered here, and this is the oldest house on Key Largo that was still in its original place. The house was built in 1912. We had some technical difficulties earlier on. Our phone
overheating in the direct sunlight.
Got a little hot in the direct sunlight and cut off, so we're going to do a little part two of our talk. I was just about to wrap up anyways, but we were talking about the cisterns outside. Now the houses in the early days, there was no running water, so the houses needed to have a fresh water supply, and what they would do is they would have cisterns attached near the house. And the peaked roofs, all the houses would have a peaked roof with a gutter system. The rain would slide off the roof into the gutters and empty out into the cisterns. Now, Beauregard Albury, who built this house about 1910, it's all Dade County pine. We are actually standing inside the house now. This would have been an outdoor balcony, patio, appears to be. Porch is the word I'm looking for. But Beauregard, in addition to the cisterns for fresh water, had dug a well for brackish water that would come up, and he would use that water for flushing of toilets and for other things that didn't require nice, clean, fresh water. Now the cisterns outside, Jerry Wilkinson and the Historic Preservation Society of the Upper Keys sponsored the building of the top to the round cistern, which kind of gives you an idea of how it would have looked back in the early 1900s. Now, the house today, as I said, stands in the original location. The Alburys used to be farmers. They were farmers farming pineapples, farming key limes. They were also fishermen who would use hand lines off the, in the water, collecting 12 to 1,500 pounds of fresh fish a day. They were paid 5 cents a pound, and they were not allowed to use rays or sharks, but they were catching 300-pound Goliath groupers, which at 5 cents a pound was a pretty good payday, as I said earlier, considering that the railroad workers were only making $1.25 a day. And the Alburys were making between $60 and $75 a day fishing and providing protein for the railroad workers. So this is the Albury House. Everyone's driven by it a million times. You can't drive on to Key West to Isla Mirada, but without passing this house. It's in the median, about mile marker 98. Again, the southbound lane would have been where the railroad tracks would have run, and then the northbound lane is the original path of State Road 4A, otherwise known as the Overseas Highway. And so that's going to wrap it up for today's Field Trip Fridays.
And Brad, maybe we can attempt one more time just to walk back outside and show them the cistern, since that's
all right.
What we were finished talking about. And we'll try and show everybody the before picture before the Historical Preservation Society of the Upper Keys started their restoration.
All right, we will follow.
Go out here.
Hopefully the sun won't melt the phone again.
A minute. So here's the cistern, the wooden cistern that Brad was talking about. You want to take it away?
Yeah. And so what HIPSUC did is they kind of redid the wooden structure to how it would have looked around the turn of the century when the Alburys first built this. And then the square cistern, and these both would have been hooked up via gutters, rain gutters. They would have come off the home. So when it rained during rainy season specifically, that these would fill up with water and provide a fresh water source for the family. Otherwise, fresh water was, came down via the train, which would have been offering daily service as early as 1908. I know the train did not reach Key West until 1912. ant bites. Erin wrapped her head against the hurricane shutter, and this.
We go to Great Lakes.
Yes, it's been a Field Trip Friday is an adventure this time. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back here on Monday, or not back here, back at the museum, the Keys History and Discovery Center on Monday for Blake Terry's exploration of our moat marine aquariums. And then Tuesday and Thursday, back at the museum with myself, talking about different exhibits. And on Wednesday, we have a new program called Community Views, and I'll be exploring, it's a webinar kind of a situation where you have to sign up for it. And there's a link on there'll be a link on our Facebook page starting Sunday and Wednesday. There's a link at our what's it called? Our website, keysdiscovery.com. All our virtual programming is available through there as well, or access to it through there as well. And I'll be exploring kind of the early rise of the community of Tavernier. So between now and then, thanks for joining us and sticking with us through this interesting.
It's a brand new phone too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was about 200 degrees when it shut off, or so it felt like. We could have roasted an egg or fried an egg on top of that phone. But again, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next Friday. And thanks a lot.